America's Most Wanted website right now and click on their 15 Most Wanted, you'll see a man by the name of Rick McLean. Rick McLean is on the list for being a serial child molester, some of his victims being as young as 5 years old. Rick McLean is a piece of shit. Rick McLean committed all of his crimes while actively serving as a ministerial servant in his local congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. He used his position as a ministerial servant to gain the trust of the parents to make sure they would leave their children alone with him. Several allegations were made against McLean while he was a witness, but none of them had the 2 witnesses required to continue the investigation into said allegations. The list goes on. Rigoberto Flores, who claimed an 8-year-old girl seduced him into molesting her. Eunice Spry, convicted of acts of child cruelty so horrible, a judge sentenced her to what was effectively a life sentence. Carrie Verse, a serial child molester of young boys, who recently was incarcerated again after being found in a car alone with a 14-year-old boy, just his type, in field service. Timothy Gardner, molester of young boys, current ministerial servant, whose own congregation is so scared of repeat offense, they had a public talk not to allow young boys to go alone into the bathroom in the Kingdom Hall. Michael Porter, molester of 12 young boys and a toddler, also a current ministerial servant whose attacks lasted a 14-year reign of terror in his congregation. Robert Souter, molester of several young boys, even attacking one in the Kingdom Hall, confessed his sin to the elders, which caused him to be disfellowshipped, only to be reinstated 6 months later. Most recently, he was in the news for violating his parole when child pornography was found on his computer. I won't bore every watcher of these videos with the details, as they're far too numerous to name here. If you want to read more, there's a book of 5,000 court documents you can feel free to buy off of Amazon.com. Now, there's a method to my droning on about various criminal Jehovah's Witnesses. One of the scriptures you'll often hear when speaking to a witness about being God's chosen people is Matthew chapter 7, verse 16, which says, "By their fruits you'll recognize them." Usually this will be followed by stories of faithful witnesses, and just as often, a story of religious abuse, possibly David Koresh or maybe even Father James Porter. Now, a later scripture in that same chapter of Matthew, verse 18, goes on to say, "A good tree cannot bear worthless fruit, neither can a rotten tree produce fine fruit." The point of this illustration on Jesus' end is that the tree producing fruit is God's organization. And by its fruit you will recognize the organization. A good organization cannot bear worthless or bad fruit, and a bad organization cannot produce good fruit. When using this scripture, why isn't the whole picture painted, warts and all, so to speak? If a good tree cannot produce worthless fruit, would these people I listed here be considered good? If a rotten tree cannot produce fine fruit, how does it explain Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., the Dalai Lama, or Mother Teresa? Tough question number 48. When using Jesus' illustration, "By their fruits you will know them," and keeping in mind that later in that same chapter he said a good tree cannot bear rotten fruit, how does this explain all the Jehovah's Witnesses in the news for committing horrible crimes?
Father, please forgive me, for I know not what I do. I just never had the chance to ever meet you. Therefore I did not know that I would grow to be my mother's evil seed.